So this video is going to be a bit out of the usual stream of content that I usually post, and will instead focus on saving any of the lost souls that may have happened to click on it looking for answers. For those of you who might not know, I am originally a die-hard Call of Duty player, and when I say die-hard, I mean very die-hard. Die-hard like logging over 2,000 hours on Blops 2 across 3 accounts die-hard. I remember waking up at the crack of dawn every morning and going to school only to unsurprisingly hate it each time, and waiting for that last sweet moment where I looked over to my friends at the end of the day and said, "I'll be on later tonight." Those were indeed the simplest times a man could ask for, coasting through school without a care in the world and playing video games with your friends that you thought you'd never lose. But the sad reality of it is, as time passes on, most of us are forced to grow up, and not many of us are able to balance video games as often as they once were. I was the last of my original group of friends to leave the gaming scene. In fact, I'm still here, but no one else is. One by one, my group of friends slowly saw their Steam accounts drift into the deep abyss of inactivity, a trench so treacherous that few, having ventured down it, lived to tell the tale. Slowly but surely, the numbers next to my friends' usernames indicating how long they've been offline grew and grew, transitioning from minutes to hours to days to weeks to years, and eventually out of my memory. But amongst the turmoil and mixed emotions I had about never being able to play with the original gang again, I met a bunch of new people, some that came and went, and others that are still here to this day. And whether new or old or new, we all had one thing in common, and that was Call of Duty. And for a while, I didn't think I'd ever be able to enjoy another game like I had COD, and my friends generally agreed with me. We loved the series and we loved playing it together. And on some days where we were feeling particularly adventurous, we tried different games like Battlefield or Halo, but they never quite resonated with us as much as Call of Duty had. There was this eerily relaxing vibe that Call of Duty had that made it fun to sit back and goof off with your friends without anything from the day prior to bog you down. But as time went on, most of my friends left just as I knew they would, to go on and handle things that were generally more important. But I never left. I always found a way to make time to play the game series that had built up my childhood and introduced me to video games as I knew it. And after going through countless rounds of friends and gangs and letting the years slip by me as I entered college, I began to think to myself, people will come and go, but I'll always have the game, and there was nothing that could separate me from the game. I was holding on the initial love and memories I had on my days on Black Ops 2 with my old pals, and I didn't want to let them go. And eventually, due to school, I had to become a solo player as I could no longer maintain any form of consistent meeting with anyone I knew because of constantly conflicting schedules. But becoming a solo player was hard because, as most Call of Duty players will tell you, the fun comes from playing with friends and having tense/funny moments. When you try to constantly play it alone, well, that's where things can get frustrating, to say the least. Nevertheless, it was a venture that I was completely willing to take in order to continue to enjoy the game that had once brought me so many positive memories. But sadly, things didn't turn out how I intended them to. While I first had a lot of success playing solo for the majority of my time in Black Ops 3 and Infinite Warfare, which, side note, isn't as bad as a game as most people would like to think, things started to take a major turn for the worse when Call of Duty World War II released. This was the first Call of Duty I had played since my initial upbringing in Black Ops 2 that did not come to me as innately as I would hope. I found myself losing slightly more gunfights, and the maps were almost impossible for me to get a feel for. My kill death ratio dropped below 2 for the first time in almost 4 iterations of the game, and I constantly found myself wanting to quit each session sooner and sooner. But despite that, I somehow found a way to enjoy the game whenever I played it with whatever friends I had left and whenever they were on. But for the first time ever, I had absolutely no urge to play a Call of Duty game if it wasn't with friends. I could not play solo anymore. And if I wasn't playing Call of Duty, sadly, I wasn't playing anything else either. But it was also around this time that I started noticing the implications of the absolutely grotesque business models introduced by Activision in the form of supply drops. I didn't make that much of a big deal out of them at first because I was usually skilled enough to the point where it didn't really matter that another person had a gun that I didn't and probably would never get, because in my mind, a winner of a gunfight wasn't determined by whatever means to an end, i.e. a gun that you happen to be undertaking. But over time, they started putting better and better guns behind higher and higher paywalls, while subsequently making the games harder and harder to play solo, to the point that there must have been a glaring neon sign in my room that said Call of Duty is no longer Call of Duty. And that realization is when I started panicking and began my journey through what I like to call the 7 stages of gamer grief, because something I loved had indeed died that day. It started with shock, as I quickly came to the realization that the new generation of Call of Duty developers didn't give a rat's ass about how veteran players like myself felt, and would rather tailor their games to maximize profit from those willing to spend it, and sadly I did not meet that criteria. All the epiphanies that I had failed to manifest at times prior because I was unwilling to accept that my favorite game wasn't perfect came crashing down like a hammer bashing me over the skull. But just as quickly as I realized that there were issues with the game, I began to believe that they must be mistakes, and that the developers were actively trying to fix them, and that there was no way that they'd be willing to throw away customers who literally built up the franchise in favor of new ones. But deny as I might, as time progressed and subsequent games released, it seemed that that was most definitely the case, because the issues I called issues were often referred to as mechanics, and I was told by the developers to either adapt or to stop playing their game. Possibly the biggest fuck you that a fuck you can get, and there it was, sitting right in front of my face as plain as day, yelling at me that I possibly wasn't wanted here anymore. But me and all the other old heads of Call of Duty refused to let the story end like that, so we kept pushing and bargaining in fits of desperation in hopes that we could see the dream of another perfect Call of Duty being released, or at the very least meeting the developers at some sort of middle ground. Yet again, that middle ground never came, and a lot of players just didn't know how to approach the series because of it. We weren't going to play something that we didn't enjoy, but at the same time we didn't want to abandon the series that built us up. So for quite some time, a lot of us just remained in silence, letting our voices be overshadowed by the odd demon that is corporate greed, and slowly mulling along while we were trapped in the cycle that we were desperately trying to fix. But there was nothing we can do, and we understood that. So at some point we became content with what we had and just continued on our way. And I had hoped that the story would end right there, but then Modern Warfare 2019 came out. It was a rumored return to form to the original Call of Duty formula, and possibly the largest bait and switch of gaming history. The game came out, and for all intents and purposes, it was nothing as advertised. The maps were absolutely horrendous and tailored to help new players to gain advantages over skilled ones, and a lot of the in-game mechanics were admitted to be there for the sole reason of basically screwing people who knew what they were doing and adding an element of chaos that can only ever be utilized by someone who had no clue of its risks. And yeah, I'm looking at you, wooden clog footsteps. But for me, after being disrespected one final time in Modern Warfare and wasting my money on a game that I thought would be great, I finally decided to stop playing. A decision that would probably leave me feeling greater than I ever had. My PS4 and PC, or formerly my Call of Duty machines, finally began to expand their horizons and playing games that I never thought I would. I was no longer just a Call of Duty gamer, and it took years of unfair business models and negligence from developers to make me realize that I never had to be. I discovered phenomenal single-player games that I wholeheartedly recommend that everyone give a shot, as well as discovered some other great FPS games that have more support and communication that I hadn't experienced in Call of Duty since the heyday. All of this just goes to say, if you love a game series, stick to it and make it yours, but never feel like it's the only thing that you have to play. I'll probably never give up on trying to play Call of Duty no matter how shit they make the game, because it's what I grew up on, but that certainly doesn't mean it has to be the only thing I play. If there's ever a time that your favorite game just quite isn't doing it for you, whether it be an annoying update or some annoying developers, don't feel restricted and go out and try something new. You'll be very surprised what you might manage to find. Expand your horizons, it will be worth it. You have tons of options. Anyways guys, that's gonna do it for today's video. Let me know if you happen to relate to anything I said on any level down below in the comments, or if you enjoyed the video in general. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that fun stuff. And I don't want to stay in your guys' hair for too long. I've been Innocence. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.